everybody, my name is Carol Brown and I'm here to talk about how to have a podcast. Before I dive into all of this video is actually just geared towards people who know nothing about podcasting or are kind of interested in having a podcast and kind of want to know what they need to do in order to get started. This is not advanced techniques or how to grow bases or anything like that. It's just kind of like an intro 101 video. And I did give podcasts its own video just because there's a lot that goes into it. And I think a lot that needs to be covered, and I didn't want to clump it in with the kind of the regular social media outreach things that authors can use in order to expand their own brand. This is something that I have done a lot of research on because I've been considering having a podcast or not, and I've had to ask myself a lot of questions like who am I talking to, what's my content going to be, and I'll mention a little bit more about that as we continue throughout the video. So if you want to start a podcast, you need to consider that like most other platforms, you don't have an overnight success promise. These are things that usually take a little bit of time, you got to put some effort into it, and you do have to do an outreach so that way people know that your podcast is there. I think podcasts are a really good alternative for people who don't want to be in front of a camera to talk on YouTube or some other platform, and it doesn't require as much equipment as a YouTube video may. Not to mention that there are individuals who are going to have a hard time wanting to show their face online because, maybe they're writing under a pen name and they can't show their face, like a teacher. And keep in mind that those individuals who do work with public services are usually held under a high scrutiny, so being able to hide their face is going to be something that they're going to want to consider. One of the big advantages with podcasts is the fact that you have the ability to talk to people while they're doing something else. People, when they're on Twitter, Instagram, or YouTube, usually have to put their full attention on that, but with a podcast, you can have somebody listening to you while they're either doing the dishes or yard work or something else, and that's actually pretty huge. A lot of people I know will listen to a podcast while they're driving to and from work, which is good. I listen to them when I'm doing housework or something that doesn't require my full attention. Now, I want to go ahead and shift away from talking about the pros of having a podcast to the kind of things that you're going to need to actually have one. You're obviously going to need a mic. I would also recommend that you get a headset so that way you can hear what you sound like. It may be a little weird for you at first, but you'll get used to it. The other thing that I would recommend, though optional, is going to be a pop filter, which is going to kind of like lessen the explosion sounds, as they like to refer, the p and the k, which basically kind of has like a k sound, and some people are very sensitive to that. You are also probably going to need some kind of communication software in the form of Skype or Discord in case you decide to do interviews, and I'm mentioning those two because those are the two widely used ones with good sound quality. Then after that, you're going to need editing software because you are going to want to edit these because you don't want to keep your ers and ahs and your bumbles and your rambling in there. There's two options that you can do. One of them is free. It's called, I'm going to mispronounce this, Adequacy, and it's really easy to use. You can just upload the sound file, record straight to the program, and then you can edit within it. The program that I use is actually Filmora because Filmora gives me the ability to record and edit audio in there, and I already know how to use Filmora, so that's what I'm using. After that, you are going to need a hosting site. There are a whole bunch of hosting sites that you can use, but Blueberry and SoundCloud are two of the main ones. These are things that you are going to have to pay for, and the plan that you pay for is going to determine how much space that you can put on there along with how much time that you can record during the course of a month. Just to make things easier for you, I'm just going to link those down below so you can go check them out at your own pace. Next, you're going to need an icon for your podcast. Think of it like the avatar that represents your podcast in general. You can either make this yourself if you have the artistic ability and software for it, or you can go to Fiverr or 99 Designs or Upwork and have somebody make it for you. And these are all pretty inexpensive. It's not going to break the bank for you. A lot of experts will say that you need to have a vanity URL for your podcast in order to be easy to find, but one of the things that I'm noticing is that more and more people are putting their podcast up on Spotify or other streaming services, so you can do your research and decide if that's something that you actually want to do or not. The name for your podcast is going to be something that you may spend a lot of time trying to figure out. I would recommend against keeping it very narrow to what the purpose of your podcast is, only because if you have it a little broader, that will entice people to actually come and listen to it, and those are potential listeners that you can have for your podcast where they may have been turned away from a more direct title. And since we did mention your listener, we do have to talk about who your audience is. It's really important that you actually do the research in regards to the target audience that you want to work with, just so that way you're more knowledgeable and are able to bring content that's more interesting for them. Trying to talk to everybody on a broad scale is really not going to do you a lot of good. I would just kind of consider the demographic that you're aiming to talk to and focus on that. Now, we talked about what you needed in order to start the podcast. Let's talk about what you have to do for the podcast. If you are doing a podcast, I'm assuming that you are doing the podcast over a topic that you love and you're passionate about. Are you passionate enough about it to do 100 episodes on it? When you're wanting to do a podcast, you're obviously wanting to do it over something that you're wanting to share with the world. But if you're picking a topic that can't be, covered for more than 3 episodes, then you may want to kind of broaden the idea of what it is that you want to talk about. Now, depending on what you're going to talk about is going to change the length of the podcast episodes themselves. For example, if somebody is just kind of sharing their thoughts and opinions on new advancements that are happening in science right now, you're going to have a podcast that's less than 20 minutes. Versus if you're going to have a podcast where you talk about a book and the themes of the book and you've got somebody doing it with you, you're looking at a possible episode that can be up to 2 hours long. My recommendation for you is to do a couple of tester episodes to see how long those are going to be. And then if you know that your episodes are going to be anywhere between like 15 and a half hour long, that's going to help you decide what hosting plan that you want. And you do want to have the right hosting plan, because the last thing you want to do is have a hosting plan that's only for 2 hours a month and then find out that you actually need to have like 4. One thing I will point out that you should keep in mind is that the average commute, which is when a lot of people do listen to podcasts, is about a half hour long, sometimes a little less, sometimes a little bit more. But if you want people to listen to it while they're going to and from work, aim for that half hour mark. Now, when you do make these episodes, there is a format to it. You have a teaser clip, which kind of gives like a snippet of what's going to be talked about. People will listen to this before they listen to the actual podcast to kind of know what they're getting into. After that, you have your intro. There's a little bit of music. You talk about who you are, what the podcast is for, and if you have anybody else that's with you. If you happen to be sponsored for whatever episode that you are airing at the time, I would mention the sponsor at the beginning of the video versus in the middle or towards the end, because you don't want that to get skipped over. After that, you're going to have your episode and then possibly a call to action. Now, what your call to action is really depending on your podcast itself. Are you asking people to review the podcast, to share it with people, to buy something? Like that just depends on you and what you're trying to do with the podcast. And once you get done with all that amazing stuff, you are going to do your outro and your outro music, and then that way people will know that that's the signal that you're done. Now, if you have the ability to record a couple of your episodes ahead of time and schedule those, I would recommend doing that just because that gives you a little bit of cushion room. And also, if you're doing this solo and you want to have a guest speaker, you have to do the whole correspondence thing where you're trying to reach out to those people and schedule, and that takes time. So just having some buffer episodes are definitely going to help you. Having said that, though, if you are doing a podcast that is involving current events at the time, having cushion episodes are going to be a little hard to do. Regardless of what you decide to do, make sure that you have your schedule, that people know the schedule, and that you are committed to the schedule. Because when you tell people that you're going to post something on Friday and then you don't post it on Friday, that's a broken promise. People don't trust you, and they're likely to not come back and listen to you. Now, one thing I do want to point out, there's that whole saying, from the movie, if you build it, they will come. People are not going to come to your podcast if they don't know it's there. That's why it's important that you make sure that you use the right key terms and the right keywords so that when people do searches for it, they can find it. But you also have to promote it. You can promote it on various social media sites. You can go ahead and send it out on Twitter, Instagram. You can talk about it on Snapchat, whatever one that you like to do. Now, that is everything I know about podcasts in a nutshell for people who don't know anything about podcasts. For you, my wonderful viewer, if you would like to talk about a podcast that you actually know and love and be willing to share about why it is that you like it, that will probably help give some other viewers an idea of where they should go with their own podcast. And I think that's pretty insightful. For example, I listen to Heaving Bosoms podcast, which basically has to do with 2 friends that review a romance novel once a week. And I really like it because both these women are particularly sassy and they have very humorous commentary on the books that they review. And I just honestly enjoy it in general. But that is my crash course on podcasting and things that you need to know before you jump into podcasting. If you happen to have found the material of this video to be useful, please feel free to hit the like button. If you would like to say something in regards to podcasting, please feel free to leave a comment down below. I do read and respond to the comments, and it keeps me engaged with my own audience, so please feel free to do that. If you've been watching my videos for a while, you notice I have a lot to say in regards to writing and kind of doing the whole writing process itself. If you would like to check and see if I know what I'm talking about in regards to this writer nonsense, I have a newsletter down below that you can click and subscribe to, and you get access to a free short story. And you can read and see if you're a reader that's for my writing style. And, if you happen to like it, please feel free to leave a review on Goodreads. I take any criticism at all just because it helps me improve myself as a writer. But yeah, that's all I got for you today. I hope you guys rock this Monday and have a good one.